People like you don't belong here.
You just made a terrible mistake.
Get out of my cabin!
This flight is diverting because of you.
Call Caleb Morgan immediately.
They forced me to stay silent.
Open cart DF4 now.
Sir, economy boarding is later. Please step out of the first-class line. The words were not shouted. That made them worse. They landed softly in the crowded terminal, wrapped in a smile that was too tight to be kind. Around Gate 14 at JFK, people stopped pretending not to listen. A man lowered his coffee. A woman in pearls looked over the top of her reading glasses. Two younger passengers lifted their phones without thinking. Malcolm Reed stood at the priority boarding lane with a worn black backpack over one shoulder and a charcoal hoodie zipped to his throat. He was 46, with tired eyes, close-cropped hair, and the kind of stillness that came from surviving rooms where people smiled while deciding you did not belong. Rachel Turner, the gate agent, kept one hand on the scanner and the other on the counter. Her nails were pale pink. Her voice stayed professional. General boarding will begin after our premium guests are seated. Malcolm looked at her for a moment. Not angry, not surprised. Just quiet. I am a premium guest, he said. Rachel's eyes moved over him. The hoodie, the faded sneakers, the backpack. No luxury carry-on. No watch flashing under the airport lights. No assistant waiting behind him with a leather folder. Her smile thinned. May I see your boarding pass? He handed her his phone. She took it as if it might stain her fingers. Behind Malcolm, a tall man in a navy blazer shifted impatiently. His silver hair was perfect. His suitcase was polished. Rachel had greeted him moments earlier with warmth in her voice. Good afternoon, Mr. Whitman. Wonderful to see you again. But now her face had changed. The scanner beeped. Green. Rachel blinked. She checked the screen again. Then the name. Then the seat. Malcolm Reed. Seat 1A, first class. For half a second, something flickered across her face. Not apology. Not shame. More like irritation that the system had betrayed her assumption. Malcolm saw it. He had seen that look many times before. At hotel desks. At private clubs. At restaurants where the host asked if he was waiting for someone. At boardrooms where men shook hands with everyone except the person who owned the company. Rachel handed the phone back. You're cleared, she said. No welcome, no eye contact, no softness. Just cleared. A few passengers looked away, embarrassed now that the small public trial had ended without the verdict they expected. Malcolm slipped the phone into his pocket. Thank you, he said. His voice was calm enough to make Rachel uneasy. He walked down the jet bridge alone. The glass walls trembled faintly as another aircraft rolled past outside. Rain streaked across the windows, turning the runway lights into long silver lines. To most people, he looked like a tired traveler. But inside his backpack was a tablet filled with financial reports, debt schedules, and internal complaints from Sky Crown Airlines. For 6 months, his company had studied the airline quietly. The numbers were weak. The leadership was arrogant. The culture was worse. And Malcolm Reed was not just a passenger. He was the founder of Reed Meridian Holdings, the investment firm preparing to take control of Sky Crown, before its board even understood how close the ground was beneath them. At the aircraft door, warm cabin light spilled into the jet bridge. A flight attendant looked up. Her name tag read Vanessa Blake. Her smile held for the passenger behind him. Then she saw Malcolm, and the smile disappeared. Vanessa Blake shifted half a step into the aisle, just enough to block him without making it look like she was blocking him. Sir, she said, her voice smooth and cool. Economy is to the right. Malcolm stopped at the aircraft door. Behind him, the line slowed. The soft shuffle of shoes on the jet bridge faded into an awkward hush. Cabin lights glowed warm over cream leather seats, silver trim, folded blankets, and glasses waiting for champagne. The space looked calm, expensive, ordered, but Malcolm had learned that polished places could still be cruel. My seat is 1A, he said. Vanessa's eyes moved to his backpack, then his hoodie, then his shoes. She did not smile. She did not ask how his day was. She studied him like a problem that had slipped past security. 1A, she repeated. Yes, her hand lifted slowly. May I see your boarding pass? He handed her his phone. She took it with 2 fingers, the way someone might pick up a damp napkin. Her thumb tapped the screen. She looked at the name, Malcolm Reed. She looked at the seat. First class, paid fare, confirmed. A small muscle jumped in her cheek. Behind Malcolm, Richard Whitman appeared at the doorway, silver-haired and comfortable in his navy blazer. Vanessa saw him and her whole face changed. Warmth returned like someone had switched on a light. "Good afternoon, Mr. Whitman," she said. "So lovely to have you with us again." Richard gave Malcolm a passing glance. Not hostile, not kind, just quick enough to place him in a category and move on. "Afternoon, Vanessa," Richard said. "Full cabin today?" "Almost," she replied, and then turned back to Malcolm. The warmth vanished. "Fine. You may proceed. Not welcome aboard. Not right this way. You may proceed." Malcolm took his phone back. His fingers did not shake. That bothered Vanessa more than anger would have. Angry passengers were familiar. They gave her something to report. Calm passengers forced everyone to notice the difference between policy and prejudice. He walked to seat 1A, the window seat in the first row. The leather was soft under his hand. Rain moved down the oval window in thin, crooked lines. He placed his worn backpack in the overhead bin. The latch closed with a quiet click. Across the galley, Harper Collins watched while pretending to count linen napkins. She was 27, new to long-haul international service, and still young enough to believe that rules were supposed to protect people equally. But she had also been flying with Vanessa for 4 months. She knew the look, the smile that froze, the voice that sharpened, the tiny punishments hidden inside polite words. Harper's fingers tightened around the napkins. "Say something," she thought. But Vanessa glanced at her once, and the thought collapsed in her chest. Malcolm sat down and buckled his seatbelt. He opened his tablet, not to watch a movie, but to review a folder labeled Sky Crown Service Culture Risk. Inside were complaint summaries, passenger removals, internal warnings, reports closed without interviews, names changed, patterns buried. He had expected numbers. He had not expected to become one of them before takeoff. Vanessa leaned toward Harper near the galley curtain. Her voice dropped low, but not low enough. "Keep an eye on 1A, she whispered. "People like that get bold when they sneak up front." Harper's face went pale. Malcolm heard every word. He did not turn around. He did not defend himself. He simply looked out at the wet runway as the engines began their low, steady hum. Something inside him went very still. Not wounded, not broken, recorded. In boardrooms, Malcolm had ended companies with less evidence than this. But this was not just a business problem anymore. It was human. It was the quiet insult older black travelers knew too well. The extra question. The colder tone. The assumption that dignity had to be proven before it was given. He closed the folder on his tablet. Then he opened a new note. Vanessa Blake. Boarding interaction. Witness present. Differential treatment observed. His thumb paused above the screen. Then he added one more line. This culture is not accidental. The cabin door closed with a heavy thud that seemed to seal the mood inside with the passengers. Sky Crown Flight 812 pushed back from the gate, moving slowly through the rain. The engines rose beneath the floor in a low vibration. Glasses trembled. Seatbelts clicked. A few people settled into the private silence of first class. The kind of silence money was supposed to buy. Vanessa moved through the cabin like she owned every inch of it. She bent beside Richard Whitman in seat 1B with a silver tray and a smile that softened her whole face. "Sparkling wine before takeoff, Mr. Whitman?" Richard folded his newspaper just enough to look at her. "You remembered. Always," Vanessa said. "We take care of our loyal guests." The words floated across the aisle and landed on Malcolm like a second inspection. He said nothing. Harper stood near the galley, watching the difference in service become impossible to ignore. Richard received a warm towel, a drink in crystal, and a quiet laugh. The couple in row 2 received blankets tucked around their shoulders. The older woman in row 3 was asked if the cabin temperature suited her. Malcolm received nothing. No towel, no drink, no question. He sat with his hands folded over his tablet and watched the rain blur into silver as the aircraft climbed up above New York. His face remained calm, but his mind moved quickly. He was not thinking about revenge. Not exactly. Revenge was personal. This was larger. This was about systems that trained ordinary people to treat cruelty as taste, suspicion as professionalism, and silence as order. When the seatbelt sign chimed off, Vanessa turned the service cart toward him at last. Her smile was gone. Drink? One word. Flat. Barely a question. Sparkling water, please, Malcolm said. Vanessa glanced at the cart. A chilled green bottle sat in plain sight, tucked beside cut limes and small glass tumblers. We're out. Malcolm looked at the bottle. Then he looked at her. There was no accusation in his face. That made it harder for her to hide from herself. Still water is fine, he said. Vanessa took a plastic pitcher from the lower shelf. She did not reach for the glass bottle. She did not reach for the crystal tumbler she had used for Richard. She grabbed a plain cup, filled it too high, and set it down hard on Malcolm's tray. Water jumped over the rim. It spread across the tray in a fast, bright sheet. Then it hit the tablet. Malcolm moved quickly. He lifted the device, but not before water slipped along the edge of the case and darkened the sleeve of his hoodie. A cold line ran down onto his pants. For 1 second, the cabin froze. The hum of the engines filled the space where an apology should have been. Vanessa looked down at the spill. Oops, she said. Harper stopped breathing. Richard lowered his newspaper. Malcolm held the tablet with both hands. He wiped the screen with the dry part of his sleeve. His thumb checked the side port. His eyes were calm, but something behind them had changed. It was not anger. It was record-keeping with a pulse. May I have a towel? He asked. Vanessa leaned closer. Her perfume was sharp. Her voice was lower now. I'm serving actual guests right now. The words struck harder than the water. Harper's hand moved toward the clean towels stacked beside her, then stopped. Vanessa's eyes cut toward her. Do not, that was all the look said. Harper looked down, shame rose into her throat. She hated herself for how quickly fear could make a good person small. Richard spoke first. That was unnecessary, he said quietly. Vanessa turned to him at once, all softness returning. I'm sorry you had to see that, Mr. Whitman. Some passengers bring too much clutter into premium spaces. Malcolm placed the tablet on a dry corner of the tray. That clutter, he said, voice low, contains a transaction review worth more than this airline's quarterly revenue. Vanessa gave a short laugh, too quick and too bright. Of course it does. A woman in row 2 looked up from her book. Harper's face went pale. Richard did not move. Malcolm slowly lifted his eyes to Vanessa. For the first time, his calm no longer looked polite. It looked dangerous. You should choose your next words carefully, he said. Vanessa's chin rose. Or what? Malcolm took a napkin from the tray. He folded it once, then again. He pressed it to the edge of the tablet with careful, almost gentle precision. The cabin waited. The engines roared softly around them. Or this flight, Malcolm said, becomes the moment your company finally learns the cost of disrespect. Vanessa Blake heard the warning and mistook it for arrogance. That was the mistake people made when they confused a uniform with wisdom. She had spent almost 20 years inside aircraft cabins, learning how to lower her voice and still make people feel small. She knew how to turn policy into pressure. She knew how to make a passenger doubt himself without ever using a word that would look bad in a report. But Malcolm Reed did not doubt himself. He sat in seat 1A with a damp sleeve, a damaged tablet, and a face so calm it unsettled her. Vanessa leaned over his tray. Sir, she said, clipping each word clean. I do not appreciate being threatened. I did not threaten you. You implied consequences. Malcolm looked up at her. Consequences are not threats. They are what happens after choices. A ripple moved through the cabin. Someone in row 2 stopped cutting into a salad. Richard Whitman folded his newspaper with slow precision. Harper stood at the galley curtain with a coffee pot in her hand, her knuckles turning white around the handle. Vanessa felt the cabin watching. That was when pride took the wheel. She straightened and raised her voice just enough. Sir, you have been difficult since boarding. You questioned crew instructions, spread personal items over the tray, and now you are making hostile remarks. Malcolm unbuckled his seatbelt. The click sounded too loud. I need to speak with the cabin service director, he said. I am the senior attendant in this cabin. Then I need to speak with the captain. Vanessa stepped into the aisle, blocking him. Sit down. The seatbelt sign is off. I said, sit down. Her voice cracked across first class. Heads turned. A man in row 3 lifted his phone halfway, pretending to check a message while aiming the camera. An older woman pressed her lips together. Richard's eyes narrowed. Harper's breath caught in her throat. Malcolm stood. He was not a large man, not in the obvious way. He did not fill the aisle with muscle or noise. His power lived somewhere quieter. In his posture, in the measured way he moved, in the absence of fear on his face. Vanessa moved closer. You do not get to intimidate my crew. Your crew? Malcolm asked. My cabin. The words came out before she could stop them. My cabin. Not the airlines, not the passengers. Hers. Malcolm took one careful step sideways, trying to pass through the narrow aisle without touching her. His shoulder brushed her sleeve. Barely. The kind of contact no one could avoid in a space built too small for human dignity. Vanessa gasped as if he had shoved her. Do not touch me. Malcolm stopped instantly. I did not touch you intentionally. She looked around. She saw Richard watching. She saw the phone in row 3. She saw Harper's pale face. She felt control slipping out of her hands, and instead of reaching for truth, she reached for power. Her hand came up fast. The slap cracked through the cabin. Malcolm's head turned with the force of it. For one sharp second, there was no engine noise, no service noise, no breath, only shock. A red mark began to rise across his left cheek. Harper dropped the coffee pot onto the galley counter. Metal hit metal with a harsh bang. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Richard stood halfway from his seat. Vanessa's chest rose and fell. Triumph flashed across her face. Then fear followed it so quickly most people missed the change. Malcolm slowly turned back. He did not raise his hand. He did not curse. He did not step toward her. He reached into the pocket of his hoodie, took out his phone, and tapped the screen once. You struck a passenger, he said. Vanessa's eyes fell to the phone. Recording. That one small word seemed to form in her mind before anyone said it. Then her face changed. The cabin sen saw it. The fear. The calculation. The instant rewrite of truth. She grabbed her own arm and screamed. He assaulted me. He grabbed me. I want the captain here now? Harper whispered, almost without sound. Vanessa? No. But Vanessa was already crying for an audience. Captain Hayes, she shouted toward the cockpit. I need you out here now. Malcolm stood in the aisle with the red print of her hand on his cheek and the phone steady in his palm. For the first time, every passenger in first class understood that something terrible had happened. Only Malcolm understood something else. The real flight had just begun. Captain Douglas Hayes came out of the cockpit with the hard stride of a man who had already chosen a side. He was 59, broad through the shoulders, with gray hair trimmed close, and a face made red by years of pressure, altitude, and certainty. The gold stripes on his sleeves caught the cabin light as he stepped into first class. His eyes went first to Vanessa, who now stood with one hand clutched around her arm, breathing as if she had survived an attack. Then he looked at Malcolm, a black man in a hoodie, standing in the aisle, a red handprint across his cheek, phone in his hand. Hayes made his decision before anyone spoke. What is going on here? He demanded. Vanessa drew in a shaking breath. Her tears came fast, too fast. He grabbed me, Captain. I told him to sit down and he pushed past me. He has been hostile since boarding. That is not true, Malcolm said. His voice was low, steady, almost too controlled for the moment. Vanessa pointed at him. Look at him. He threatened me. He refused instructions. I was afraid for my safety. Harper stood near the galley, pale as paper. She could still hear the slap. She could still see Malcolm's head turn. She could still feel the sick drop in her stomach when Vanessa started lying. Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. Captain Hayes turned toward Malcolm. Sir, return to your seat. Your crew member struck me across the face. Hayes glanced at the mark. Then he looked away as if the evidence inconvenienced him. My crew member reports you assaulted her. Richard Whitman rose halfway from seat 1B, his newspaper folded in one hand. Captain, I saw the entire thing. Mr. Reed did not assault her. She slapped him. Vanessa snapped her head toward him. Panic flickered beneath the tears. Mr. Whitman, I know this was upsetting, but from your angle you may not have seen the contact clearly. I saw enough, Richard said. Everyone did. A woman in row 2 lifted her phone slightly. I heard the slap, she said, and I recorded after it happened. The cabin shifted. Quietly, carefully. The way people move when truth enters a room that power is trying to control. Hayes felt it and hated it. A captain was trained to manage emergencies. Weather, mechanical faults, medical events, not moral failure in his own cabin. He had spent decades believing order mattered more than interpretation. But order without truth was just fear wearing a uniform. He stepped closer to Malcolm. Sir, sit down now or I will have you restrained. Malcolm's eyes sharpened. Restrained for being assaulted? For creating a safety concern on my aircraft. My aircraft. The second claim of ownership in less than an hour. Harper gripped the galley wall. Her throat burned. She wanted to speak. She wanted to be brave. But Vanessa had trained fear into her over months. One bad report. One schedule cut. One quiet word to management. That was all it took to ruin a junior attendant who still needed this job to pay rent and send money home to her father in Ohio. Malcolm looked past Hayes and met Harper's eyes. Not pleading, not blaming, just seeing her. That was worse. Because being seen meant she could no longer pretend she had no choice. Hayes touched the radio near the cockpit door. I am diverting this aircraft to Bangor, he said. Law enforcement will meet us on arrival. A gasp moved through first class. Vanessa's mouth trembled, but relief flooded her eyes. Malcolm looked at his watch. Then he looked back at Hayes. Captain, you are making a serious mistake. Hayes leaned in. Is that a threat? No, Malcolm said. It is a courtesy. He sat down slowly in seat 1A, not defeated, not small, not afraid. His cheek still burned. His sleeve was still damp. His tablet sat dark on the tray beside him. But his hand moved with calm purpose. He unlocked his phone. Captain Hayes returned to the cockpit to begin the diversion. Vanessa stayed near the galley, whispering sharply to Harper. You saw what he did. You tell them he grabbed me. Harper stared at her. Vanessa's eyes hardened. You understand me? Harper swallowed. Her voice came out broken. I did not see him grab you. Vanessa stepped closer. Then you did not see anything. In seat 1A, Malcolm placed a call. The line connected after one ring. A calm male voice answered, Caleb Morgan. Malcolm kept his eyes on the closed cockpit door. Pull Sky Crown's current debt structure, voting exposure, convertible notes, and open liabilities. I want controlling pathways in 60 seconds. There was a pause, then the voice changed. Focused. Alert. Malcolm, are we moving today? Malcolm looked once at Vanessa. Yes, he said. Today. Caleb Morgan did not ask why. That was why Malcolm trusted him. In a glass office overlooking downtown Chicago, Caleb turned away from a wall of market screens and snapped his fingers at two analysts sitting behind him. His smout jacket was off. His tie was loose. His eyes had gone cold with focus. Sky Crown Airways, he said. All active debt positions now. On the aircraft, Malcolm sat still in seat 1A, his phone pressed lightly to his ear. Around him, first class had gone quiet in the way a room goes quiet after violence. People were breathing carefully, watching carefully, trying to decide whether they had witnessed a bad moment or the beginning of something much larger. Vanessa stayed near the galley, arms folded, her face still arranged into injury. But her eyes kept moving to Malcolm's phone. Richard Whitman watched from across the aisle. He had spent his life around money. Real money, the kind that did not announce itself with noise. And now he recognized something in Malcolm's voice that made his stomach tighten. This was not a customer service complaint. This was a transaction. Caleb's voice came back through the line. Sky Crown is weaker than expected. Heavy short-term debt, pension exposure. 3 lender groups are nervous. There are convertible notes held through 2 distressed funds and a voting block tied to the Whitaker Family Trust. Can we reach control today? A pause. Keys clicked fast in the background. Not clean control, not yet. But decisive influence, yes. If we trigger the notes, acquire the distressed positions, and pressure Whitaker, we can cross the threshold before landing. Call them, Malcolm. That will be hostile. Malcolm looked toward the cockpit door. They made it hostile. Caleb exhaled once. Understood. Vanessa took a step closer. Who are you calling? She demanded. Malcolm did not look at her. That frightened her more than an answer. Harper stood behind the galley curtain, hands clasped so tightly her fingers hurt. She had heard enough to understand that something was shifting under her feet. Not in the aircraft, in the world around it. The kind of shift that makes people who abuse small authority suddenly realize there is a larger authority coming. Vanessa whispered sharply, "Harper, stop staring." Harper looked down, but not for long. Across the aisle, Richard leaned forward. His voice was low. "Mr. Reed, are you who I think you are?" Malcolm's eyes stayed on the tablet, dark and wet along one edge. "That depends who you think I am." Richard swallowed. "Reed Meridian Holdings." Vanessa's face tightened. She knew that name. Not well, not enough. But enough to know it belonged in business headlines, not in a hoodie by the window. Caleb returned. "Whitaker Trust is willing to sell, but they want a premium. Give it to them. It is expensive. So is arrogance." Caleb did not answer. The line filled with the quiet thunder of decisions being made at speed. In the cockpit, Captain Hayes spoke into the radio with the clipped authority of a man building an official record. "Operations. This is Sky Crown 812. We are declaring a passenger disturbance. Potential crew assault allegation. Requesting diversion coordination to Bangor and law enforcement on arrival." He expected agreement. He expected procedure. He expected the system to protect him. Because systems had always protected men like him when they wore the right uniform and spoke with enough certainty. Then the cockpit phone rang. Hayes frowned and picked it up. "This is Captain Hayes." The voice from operations was tight. "Captain, hold diversion instructions." Hayes stiffened. "Excuse me? Do not proceed with diversion at this time. This passenger is a safety concern." "Captain, listen carefully. The passenger in 1A is Malcolm Reed." Hayes looked through the cockpit door window toward the cabin. "So?" The voice dropped lower. "As of minutes ago, Reed Meridian Holdings has acquired a decisive voting position in Sky Crown Airways. The board is in emergency session. You are not to restrain him. You are not to divert unless there is an actual medical or mechanical emergency." Hayes's mouth went dry. Behind him, the aircraft hummed on, steady and indifferent. In seat 1A, Malcolm ended his call and placed the phone beside his damaged tablet. Vanessa stared at him. Her confidence had begun to leak away, one breath at a time. "What is happening?" she asked. Malcolm finally turned his head. The red mark on his cheek had darkened. "Consequences," he said one word. "Quiet. Final." Captain Hayes stepped out of the cockpit, looking older than he had 10 minutes before. The red certainty in his face had drained into something gray and tight. His shoulders were still squared, but the force behind them was gone. He had commanded aircraft through storms over the Rockies. He had talked nervous passengers through turbulence. He had worn authority so long it felt like skin, but he did not know what to do when power changed hands in the middle of the sky. Vanessa turned toward him at once. "Captain," she said, her voice eager and brittle. "Are we diverting?" Hayes did not answer right away. That silence told her more than words could have. Malcolm remained seated in 1A. The mark on his cheek had darkened from red to a deep, painful rose. His damp sleeve rested beside the damaged tablet. He looked less like a victim now and more like a verdict waiting to be read. Hayes cleared his throat. "We are continuing to New York." Vanessa blinked. "What?" "We are not diverting." Her face tightened. "But he assaulted me." Richard Whitman leaned forward. "No, he did not." Vanessa whipped toward him. "You do not know what happened." "I watched you slap him," Richard said. His voice carried through the cabin. So did several other people. A woman in row 2 raised her phone slightly. "I have part of it recorded," she said. Vanessa's lips parted. For the first time, she saw the cabin clearly, not as her kingdom, as witnesses, phones, eyes, memory, evidence. Harper stood near the galley with a stack of towels clutched against her chest. She had finally picked them up, but too late to prevent the damage. Her hands trembled, not from fear alone, from shame. Malcolm looked at her. "Miss Collins," he said. Harper flinched at the sound of her own name. Vanessa turned sharply. "Do not answer him." Malcolm's gaze did not move. "Would you bring me a towel, please?" It was such a simple request. That made it hurt more. Harper stepped forward. One step, then another. Her shoes made almost no sound on the carpet, but to her it felt like walking across a courtroom. She handed Malcolm the towel with both hands. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Vanessa's eyes burned into her. Malcolm took the towel. "For what you did, or for what you watched?" Harper's face crumpled. She could have lied. She could have chosen the safer answer. She could have hidden inside the words people use when they are afraid. But something in her had broken open. "For both," she said. The cabin went silent. Hayes shifted near the cockpit door. His jaw worked as if he wanted to speak, but could not decide which version of himself should answer. Malcolm wiped the edge of his tablet slowly. "Thank you for telling the truth," he said. Harper nodded once. A tear slipped down her cheek. She turned away before Vanessa could use it against her. Hayes lowered his voice. "Mr. Reed, management will address after landing." Malcolm looked up. "Management already is." Vanessa stared at him. Her confusion was turning into dread. "Who are you?" she asked. Malcolm folded the towel once and set it beside the tablet. "The person your company should have treated like a passenger." The words did not reveal everything. Not yet, but they pulled the air out of the cabin. Hayes swallowed. "Perhaps we can discuss this privately when we arrive." "No." One syllable. Cold. Final. Malcolm stood, and this time no one told him to sit down. He looked at Vanessa, then at Hayes, then at the passengers who had watched a uniform become a weapon. "There will be no private version of what happened here," he said. "Not for you, not for her, not for Sky Crown." Vanessa's hands trembled at her sides. Malcolm turned toward the galley. "And now, Captain, I want every duty-free cart sealed and left exactly where it is." Hayes froze. His eyes snapped up, too fast. "What did you say?" Malcolm saw it. So did Richard. So did Harper. Fear. Not about the slap, something deeper. Malcolm's voice dropped. "Yes, Captain," he said. "I know about the carts. Behind the polished walls of first class, behind the champagne and warm towels, something rotten had just taken its first breath in the open air." Hayes looked at Vanessa with a warning so sharp it cut through the cabin. "Do not say another word." Vanessa closed her mouth. Harper felt the temperature drop inside her chest. She had heard rumors about the duty-free carts since her first month with Sky Crown. Every airline had gossip, but this was different. Certain carts were never handled by new crew. Certain seals were not questioned. Certain inventory sheets were signed before anyone counted a thing. Vanessa called it premium routing. Other attendants called it mind your business. Malcolm turned to Harper. "Miss Collins," he said, calm as ever. "How long has cart DF4 had a broken seal latch?" Vanessa stepped forward. "She doesn't know anything." Harper's fingers tightened around the towel stack. Malcolm did not look away from her. How long? Harper saw Vanessa's face. She saw Hayes's jaw. She saw the career she had been trying to protect. Rent bills, her father's medication, her own fear standing between her and the truth. Then she looked at Malcolm's cheek. 6 seconds passed, maybe 7. 6 months, she whispered. Vanessa hissed through her teeth. "Harper, but fear once broken can become something stronger." Harper kept going, maybe longer. "We were told not to report it." Vanessa said maintenance already knew. Hayes closed his eyes. Richard Whitman sat very still. The woman in row 2 kept her phone low in her lap, recording without moving her face. No one in first class breathed loudly. Malcolm turned toward the galley. "Open it." Vanessa's voice cracked. "You cannot order my crew to open secured airline property." Malcolm looked back at her. "My airline property." The words struck the cabin like a door kicked open. Vanessa's face emptied. Harper stared at him. Hayes whispered, "Good Lord." Malcolm reached for the cabin interphone before Hayes could stop him. He pressed the button. His voice moved through the aircraft, calm and absolute. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Malcolm Reed in seat 1A. Moments ago, Reed Meridian Holdings acquired a decisive voting position in Sky Crown Airways. I apologize for the disturbance on this flight. You will all receive a full refund and written follow-up from the company. What happens next concerns safety, law, and accountability. Please remain seated." Whispers rolled through the aircraft like wind through dry leaves. Vanessa backed into the galley counter. "No," she said. "That is impossible." Malcolm lowered the interphone. "Harper, open DF4. Harper moved like someone walking into a storm. She released the brake on the duty-free cart. The wheels squeaked as she pulled it into the open. Her hands shook over the plastic seal. From a distance, it looked official. Up close, it was cheap, temporary, a costume of compliance. She cut it. The latch came loose with a small metallic click. Inside were duty-free boxes stacked too neatly. Perfume, watches, miniature liquor, all normal at first glance. Malcolm removed the top tray. Beneath it sat a thin false panel. Hayes turned away. Vanessa whispered, "Captain, stop him." But Hayes did not move. Malcolm lifted the panel. The hidden compartment was packed in gray foam. Luxury watches still wrapped in film. Small velvet pouches. Loose stones in sealed bags. Electronic components labeled as catering supplies. Not enough to look like a movie. Enough to look like a crime that had been happening quietly for a long time. Harper covered her mouth. Richard muttered, "My God." Malcolm took a photo, then another. His face did not show surprise. This was not discovery to him. It was confirmation. He looked at Hayes. "Did you declare this cargo?" Hayes said nothing. That silence answered more than a confession would have. Vanessa's breathing became ragged. Malcolm set the panel back down with care. At John F. Kennedy, federal agents will meet this aircraft. No one touches this cart. No one deletes a message. No one gets a private conversation. Vanessa's knees softened. She gripped the counter to stay standing. Harper lowered her hand from her mouth and looked at the cart, then at Malcolm, then at the passengers who had watched everything unfold. For the first time in months, she felt afraid of the right thing, and that felt almost like freedom. The final hour over the Atlantic passed in a silence no luxury cabin could soften. Vanessa sat strapped into the jump seat near the galley. Her makeup had not moved, but everything beneath it had collapsed. Her hands were locked together so tightly, her knuckles looked white. The woman who had ruled first class with a sharp smile now stared at the floor like she was waiting for it to open. Captain Hayes did not leave the cockpit again. His voice came once over the speaker, flat and stripped of warmth. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have begun our descent into John F. Kennedy International Airport. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." That was all. No charm, no confidence, no command. Just a man listening to his career fall faster than the airplane. Malcolm sat in 1A with his tablet dried and powered down, his cheek still marked, his phone resting beside his hand. Caleb had sent updates from the ground. Emergency board meeting active. Federal authorities notified. Customs notified. Evidence preservation order issued. But Malcolm was not looking at the messages. He was looking at Harper. She stood near the galley, quieter than before, but not smaller. Something had changed in her posture. Fear still lived in her eyes, but it no longer owned her spine. "You did the right thing," Malcolm said. Harper swallowed. Too late. Malcolm held her gaze. Late is not the same as never. The words struck her harder than comfort would have. She nodded once and looked away before the tears could fall. The wheels hit the runway with a hard shudder. Several passengers gasped. The engines roared in reverse. Outside the windows, New York lights streaked through the dark like judgment written in gold. The plane did not taxi to a normal gate. It stopped on a remote stand. That was when Vanessa began to shake. Through the oval windows, passengers saw black government vehicles waiting on the tarmac. Customs units, unmarked federal cars. Men and women in dark jackets stood beneath floodlights with faces no one could read. Vanessa unbuckled too quickly. "I need to use the restroom," she said. Malcolm did not look up. "Sit down." Her mouth opened. "You cannot tell me what to do." He turned his head slowly. "I already did." The cabin door opened. Cold night air rushed in. Federal agents boarded with quiet efficiency, their shoes heavy on the aircraft floor. A woman in a navy jacket stepped forward. Her badge caught the light. "Malcolm Reed?" Malcolm stood. "Yes. Special Agent Dana Whitfield, Federal Bureau of Investigation. We received the evidence package." He handed her his phone. "Cart DF4. False compartment beneath the second tray. Possible smuggling. Undeclared luxury goods. Loose stones. Electronic components labeled as catering supplies. Preserve Captain Hayes's cockpit communications and personal phone. Preserve Ms. Blake's devices." Vanessa stood. Her voice cracked into panic. "This is insane. He attacked me. He is manipulating all of you. Special Agent Whitfield looked at the red handprint on Malcolm's face, then at Vanessa. Ms. Blake, sit down. I am the victim here. No, Richard Whitman said from 1B, rising slowly. You are not. The woman in row 2 lifted her phone. I have video. Harper stepped forward. She trembled, but her voice was clear. So do I, and I can identify the cart history. Vanessa turned on her with pure hatred. You little traitor. Harper's voice broke, but she did not retreat. No, I am done being afraid of you. The words stopped Vanessa cold. 2 agents moved down the aisle. 1 entered the cockpit. Moments later, Captain Hayes emerged. His face was gray. His hands were visible. Douglas Hayes, Special Agent Whitfield, said, You are being detained pending investigation. Hayes looked at Malcolm once. No apology came. Only the ruined silence of a man who had mistaken a uniform for immunity. Vanessa screamed when the cuffs touched her wrists. You cannot do this to me. I have worked for this airline for almost 20 years. Malcolm watched her without satisfaction. Then you had almost 20 years to learn how to treat people. The cabin went still as agents led Vanessa and Hayes off the aircraft. Passengers remained seated, phones lowered now, faces somber. This no longer felt like entertainment. It felt like a reckoning. Malcolm looked out at the dark runway and the waiting lights. Sky Crown had landed in New York, but its old life had ended somewhere over the ocean. 3 days later, Malcolm Reed walked into Sky Crown's headquarters in Manhattan, wearing a dark suit, polished shoes, and the same calm that had unnerved an entire aircraft. No hoodie now, no worn backpack, no easy excuse for anyone to pretend they did not see him. The boardroom sat high above 6th Avenue, with lit glass walls and a long walnut table that reflected every nervous face around it. Outside, traffic moved below like a living river. Inside, 12 executives sat in silence, each one trying not to look afraid. They had seen the videos. Vanessa Blake slapping a passenger, Captain Hayes ignoring witnesses, federal agents removing both of them from the aircraft. They had also read the first legal filings, undeclared cargo, false inventory records, retaliation against junior employees, passenger discrimination complaints marked resolved without interviews. A culture that had learned to bury pain under polished language. Caleb Morgan stood near the screen and laid out the facts. Not rumors. Facts. Debt exposure. Legal risk. Open federal investigation. Internal complaints suppressed for years. Customer service reports altered before audits. Crew members punished for raising concerns. Each slide landed like another door closing. A silver-haired director named Alan Pierce cleared his throat. Mr. Reed, surely we can manage the public side of this with some discretion. Malcolm looked at him. Discretion is how this company got sick. No one moved. The city hummed behind the glass. Malcolm placed a thin folder on the table. Effective immediately, the old executive committee is dissolved. Any officer connected to suppressed complaints, fraudulent cargo handling, or retaliatory staffing decisions is suspended pending legal review. Sky Crown will cooperate fully with federal authorities. Alan's mouth tightened. You cannot rebuild an airline by humiliating its leadership. Malcolm's eyes did not blink. I am not humiliating anyone. I am removing the cover they were hiding under. That sentence changed the room. A woman near the end of the table looked down at her hands. Another executive closed his eyes. Somewhere in that silence, Old Power realized it was no longer protected by polished shoes and familiar names. Malcolm continued, The airline will be restructured under a new name, Horizon Meridian Air, new leadership, independent oversight, mandatory ethics and de-escalation training from the gate to the cockpit. Every discrimination complaint from the past 5 years will be reopened. Every employee punished for telling the truth will be contacted. The door opened. Harper Collins stepped in. She wore a simple navy suit. Her hair was pulled back. Her face looked nervous, but steady. She did not look like power yet. She looked like someone who had survived fear and decided not to return to it. Malcolm turned toward the room. Harper Collins will serve as Vice President of Customer Experience. A stir moved around the table. Alan almost laughed. With respect, she was a junior flight attendant. Malcolm's voice stayed even. She was the only person on that aircraft who chose truth when silence was safer. That makes her more qualified than many people in this room. Harper's eyes filled, but she did not look away. Weeks later, the first Horizon Meridian aircraft rolled onto the runway at JFK in clean, silver and deep blue. Near the boarding door, painted in small letters, was the new promise: no one is invisible. Malcolm watched from the terminal as passengers boarded. An elderly veteran in a worn jacket, a grandmother with a cane, a young mother carrying a sleeping child, a businessman in jeans, a college student with headphones and scuffed sneakers. Different lives, different stories, same dignity. For Malcolm, that had always been the point. Power was not proven by humiliating someone who could not fight back. Power was proven by changing the system that allowed humiliation to happen in the first place. As the aircraft lifted into the morning sky, Harper stood near the gate window, quiet tears on her face. Malcolm did not tell her the pain was over. Healing was never that simple. But he did tell her the truth. "You did not start this," he said, "but you helped end it." And somewhere above New York, the airline that once asked a man in a hoodie if he belonged finally began learning the answer. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment about a time someone stood up for dignity. And if you believe respect should never depend on how a person looks, stay with us for the next story.